By the time Rachel Ludlow understood that the Duke of Carringford was being refused visitors inside his own house, the refusal had already been written in his name. Foxgrove Park, Kent, Monday the 11th October 1852. The house rose beyond the turning, drive in pale stone and dark ivy, broad enough to make arriving carriages look temporary, and the people inside them smaller than they had been 5 minutes before. Rachel had learned long ago not to be intimidated by large houses. Houses, however grand, required fires laid, letters answered, guests placed, servants paid, and people forgiven. Human beings remained human beneath carved ceilings. At 37, widowed 8 years, and living on a modest annuity that allowed independence without extravagance, she had become skilled at entering rooms without asking them to admire her. The Dowager Duchess of Carringford had invited her for an autumn visit, after meeting her twice in London, and deciding, with the directness of elderly women who had outlived the need to flatter, that Rachel possessed a useful lack of nonsense. Rachel had accepted because she liked the Dowager. She had not expected Foxgrove itself to offer entertainment before her travelling cloak was removed. She stood in the great entrance hall while a footman carried her card away, for the porter could summon a maid. The front doors opened again, and an elderly clergyman stepped inside, brushing the chill from his sleeves. His coat was good but old, his silver hair flattened by a hat he held carefully against his chest. "Good morning, Mr. Pritchard," the porter said. "Good morning, Hales. Is His Grace at home?" The porter hesitated. It was only a second, but Rachel had spent too many years among drawing-rooms to mistake hesitation for uncertainty when it was actually instruction. A rustle of silk sounded from the staircase. Lady Josephine Keene descended with the unhurried composure of a woman, accustomed to finding that the room had arranged itself before she reached it. She was handsome, polished, and perhaps 40, with the kind of smile that could offer welcome while measuring whether the recipient deserved it. "Mr. Pritchard," she said, "how kind of you to call." The rector brightened. "I hoped I might have 10 minutes with His Grace. I heard he had come down from London earlier than expected." Lady Josephine glanced at the porter. "His Grace is not receiving callers." Mr. Pritchard's fingers tightened almost invisibly around the brim of his hat. "Of course, I should not wish to inconvenience him. I am sure you understand." Lady Josephine turned to a narrow console table near the wall. A small stack of cream household cards rested beside the silver salver. "Hales, give Mr. Pritchard the usual message." The porter selected one. Lady Josephine leaned near enough to murmur a few words. He dipped a pen, wrote quickly, blotted the line, and handed the card to the rector. Rachel did not move closer, but she saw the small fox device impressed at the top and the shape of the sentence beneath it. "His Grace declines to receive callers." Mr. Pritchard read it. Something in his expression altered. Not offense, something quieter. Embarrassment, perhaps, made worse because he had clearly expected a different answer. "Please tell him I called," he said, "if he should ask." "Naturally," Lady Josephine replied. The porter opened the door. Mr. Pritchard stepped back into the October air. Rachel kept her eyes on the gloves she had begun removing one finger at a time. It was none of her business. That was a useful principle. It had preserved many women from trouble and many households from truth. "Mrs. Ludlow," Lady Josephine had turned toward her, "you must forgive the delay. Country houses produce interruptions as faithfully as orchards produce apples. Then one must hope the interruptions are as useful, Lady Josephine." A faint pause followed. Rachel had not intended insolence. She had merely answered. Lady Josephine smiled again. The Dowager has spoken very warmly of you. She has been very kind. She is fond of people who make themselves useful. Before Rachel could decide whether that was meant as praise, footsteps crossed the marble floor behind her. The effect upon the servants was immediate. No scrambling, no theatrical bows. Only a tightening of posture, a quiet alertness passing through the hall as naturally as wind crossing grass. Rachel turned. Robert Whitaker, Duke of Carringford, had entered from a corridor to the west. He was taller than she had expected, and not handsome in the easy, decorative way fashionable portraits preferred. His face was lean, severe at first glance, the mouth controlled, the eyes an unreadable grey. His dark coat was cut without ornament. He looked like a man who had removed every unnecessary thing from his life and discovered that silence remained. Lady Josephine stepped toward him. "Robert, Mrs. Ludlow has arrived." His attention shifted to Rachel, not over her shoulder, not toward the porter waiting with her luggage, directly to her, Mrs. Ludlow. There was the slightest measured pause before the next words. "Welcome to Foxgrove." "Thank you, Your Grace." Another pause, brief enough that someone less attentive might have missed it. "My mother has been looking forward to your visit." Rachel inclined her head. "Then I hope I shall not disappoint her by proving less sensible than advertised." Something changed in his eyes. Not amusement. Not yet. Recognition, perhaps, of a sentence that had not been rehearsed for him. Lady Josephine laughed lightly on his behalf. "Rachel is wonderfully practical. You will discover that useful widows are a blessing in a house full of young people." The Duke looked at Lady Josephine, then back at Rachel. "I should rather discover Mrs. Ludlow before deciding what use she is." The words were calm. Their effect was not. Lady Josephine's smile remained, but Rachel saw the fraction by which it became effort. The Duke gave Rachel a slight bow and continued toward the staircase. As he passed the front doors, he glanced toward the empty space where Mr. Pritchard had stood moments earlier. He said nothing. By dinner, Rachel had almost persuaded herself that the morning had been trivial. Foxgrove's dining room did its best to make triviality impossible. Silver reflected candlelight across the long table. The Dowager Duchess, sharp-eyed and warm, beneath an impressive arrangement of grey hair, greeted Rachel as if the house had been waiting specifically for her arrival. Sir Vincent Keene sat several places from Robert. He was a baronet, smooth in speech, agreeable in manner, and evidently practiced in directing conversation without appearing to control it. Rachel listened more than she spoke. That, too, was a habit. People disclosed extraordinary quantities of themselves to a woman they considered harmless. When the talk turned to a young widow expected later in the week, Lady Josephine's sighed. "She is very pretty, which is often less useful than people imagine. Rachel will understand. She is one of those useful widows who never requires attention." The comment drew two polite smiles. Rachel lowered her gaze to her wineglass. She had heard kinder versions of the same judgment for years. A widow beyond the first bloom of youth, financially modest, socially respectable, capable of arranging flowers, smoothing awkward dinners, escorting younger women, and requiring nothing visible in return. Useful was a lovely word when one wished to praise a woman without admitting she possessed desires of her own. "Mrs. Ludlow." Robert's voice came from across the table. Rachel looked up. He had not raised it, yet the conversation thinned around him. "What do you do when no one requires you to be useful?" The question was so unexpected that she nearly laughed, not from humor, but surprise. Lady Josephine answered before she could. "Oh, Rachel reads, I am sure. She has always been content with simple occupations." Robert did not look at her. His gaze remained on Rachel. I asked Mrs. Ludlow. Silence touched the table. Rachel considered giving a safe answer. Embroidery, reading, walking, something smooth enough to pass unnoticed. Instead, she said, "I take long walks when weather allows. I sketch badly. I read newspapers that ladies are not always expected to enjoy. And sometimes I sit in a room without improving anyone in it." The Dowager Duchess hid a smile behind her glass. Robert's expression did not alter much, but his attention sharpened. "That sounds remarkably disciplined." "It has taken years of practice, Your Grace." Sir Vincent leaned toward Robert as the conversation shifted to county affairs. A neighboring estate had disputed an arrangement concerning a road near the parish boundary. Robert began to answer. "The matter should be settled before the winter if the surveyor can." The next word did not come immediately. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sir Vincent supplied it with easy familiarity. "Complete the measurements before the ground worsens." Precisely what Robert means. Robert's eyes lowered for one brief second. Then he inclined his head and allowed the conversation to move on. Rachel said nothing. She had no right to decide what she had seen. Perhaps Sir Vincent had performed a kindness accepted many times before. Perhaps Robert preferred it. Perhaps the pause meant nothing. Yet the image of the entrance hall returned with uncomfortable clarity. The rector holding a cream card. Lady Josephine speaking softly to the porter. A refusal written under the authority of a man who hours later had looked directly at Rachel and waited for her own answer. Dinner ended near 10. Guests rose, chairs moved, servants opened doors. Rachel was following the Dowager toward the drawing room when Robert spoke behind them. "Mother." The Dowager turned. "Yes. Did Mr. Pritchard call today?" Rachel stopped without meaning to. The Dowager frowned. "I do not know. Why?" Robert looked toward the dark windows beyond the hall. "I had hoped he would." Tuesday morning at Foxgrove began with the peculiar quiet that follows a question no one has answered. Rachel had gone to bed, still hearing the Duke's final words from the previous evening. "I had hoped he would." She had also gone to bed knowing that Mr. Pritchard had indeed called, that Lady Josephine had dictated the refusal, and that Robert Whitaker apparently knew none of it. By breakfast, she had decided that observation was not yet evidence of deceit. It would be reckless to mistake one contradiction for a conspiracy. But it was difficult to forget the rector's face. The Dowager Duchess, however, allowed Rachel little time for private speculation. "You're coming with me," she announced after breakfast. "Robert has been avoiding his invitations, which means I shall make them impossible to avoid." Rachel followed her along the west corridor to the Duke's study carrying a modest stack of cream cards tied with green ribbon. The door stood open. Two elderly ladies who had been discussing a charitable subscription with Robert were preparing to leave, while Sir Vincent lingered near the fireplace and Lady Josephine examined a vase as though Foxgrove depended upon her approval of its flowers. Robert stood behind his desk with one hand resting on a sheaf of correspondence. He looked no warmer in daylight than he had at dinner, but Rachel noticed that his severity was largely stillness. He did not fidget or fill silences. "Mother," he said, "you appear armed. Only with invitations, far more dangerous." The Dowager handed Rachel half the stack and moved toward the escritoire by the window. "Put those beside Robert's seal, if you please." Rachel crossed to the desk. She meant only to deposit the cards and step away. Then she saw the fox. It stood beside the inkwell, small enough to fit into a palm, carved from dark wood and polished smooth by years of handling. One ear was chipped, its narrow muzzle pointed upward with such severe disapproval that it appeared to be judging the entire room. The paws were uneven, and one eye sat slightly higher than the other. It possessed the solemnity of a magistrate and the workmanship of a child who had refused advice. Rachel looked at it a second too long. The dowager noticed. "What is it?" She murmured from beside her. Rachel lowered her voice. "I was only thinking that Fox looks like a bishop who's discovered the pudding arrived before the sermon." The sound came from behind her. It began as a startled breath and broke open before anyone could stop it. Robert laughed, not the courteous murmur gentleman sometimes offered an amusing remark, not the dry exhalation of a man acknowledging wit without surrendering dignity. A real laugh escaped him, warm and sudden, deep enough to change his whole face. Rachel turned. For one impossible instant, the Duke looked years younger. The severity around his mouth vanished. His eyes closed briefly. One hand caught the edge of the desk, as though the sound had surprised his body as much as everyone else. Then the room went still. Sir Vincent stared. Lady Josephine's expression emptied before control returned. The Dowager Duchess did not move at all. Rachel felt heat rise beneath her collar. Whatever invisible boundary governed Foxgrove, she had plainly crossed it. Robert's laughter ceased almost as abruptly as it had begun. The silence afterward seemed to trouble him more than the laughter itself. His shoulders tightened. He looked from the frozen faces around him to Rachel. She set the invitations down with great care. "Your Grace, forgive me. I didn't realize. You were not laughing at me." His voice came slowly, but the statement was firm. Rachel hesitated. "No." "Then there's nothing to forgive." Lady Josephine recovered first. "Robert, Mrs. Ludlow could hardly have known that the carving was private." The word private carried more rebuke than concern. Rachel looked at the fox again. "I truly didn't. I thought it was only an unfortunate animal with strong ecclesiastical opinions." The dowager made a small sound that might have been a cough. Robert's mouth altered. Not another laugh. Almost a smile. Then restraint closed over it. Lady Josephine's gaze sharpened. Some people are fortunate enough to mistake familiarity for charm. Rachel understood the correction. She had spent enough years in other people's houses to recognize when dignity required retreat. "Lady Josephine is right about one thing," she said. "I didn't know the object mattered. I'm sorry for that, Your Grace." Robert looked at her for a long moment. "And I'm telling you that you have done no harm." The emphasis was quiet, but it ended the matter. He turned to the two older ladies, who seemed embarrassed to have witnessed something so intimate as unguarded amusement. "Mrs. Fenton, Lady Mayhew, I believe my mother still means to extract a promise from both of you regarding Thursday." Courtesy started again. Invitations were discussed. Sir Vincent resumed his position near the fire. Yet the room did not return entirely to what it had been. Rachel could feel the disturbance beneath every ordinary sentence. The dowager's hands trembled once as she retied the green ribbon around the remaining cards. Rachel pretended not to see. 10 minutes later, the visitors had gone. Sir Vincent left with them after murmuring something to Robert about estate papers. Lady Josephine remained only long enough to tell the dowager she would inspect the dining room flowers. When the door closed behind her, Rachel finally exhaled. The dowager looked at Robert. Well, he gave his mother a warning glance. "Don't." "I said nothing. You were preparing to." I've been your mother for 42 years. Preparation is one of my few remaining pleasures. Rachel lowered her eyes, uncertain whether she should leave. Robert noticed. Mrs. Ludlow. She looked up. Do you know who carved it? He nodded toward the wooden fox. No, Your Grace. You assumed a child. I assumed a child with determination and very little supervision. The dowager turned toward the window, unmistakably hiding a smile. Robert picked up the fox. His thumb passed once over the chipped ear. I did. Rachel blinked. You? I was 14. My tutor said the proportions were impossible. Entirely. Then I admire your persistence. His eyes met hers. This time, the faint change at his mouth remained for a heartbeat longer. You are very careful not to flatter me. I've known Your Grace for less than a day. It would be premature to begin badly. The dowager laughed outright. Robert did not. But he looked at Rachel with an attention that felt different from courtesy. Then he set the fox precisely where it had stood before. My mother tells me you walk, when weather permits. She intends to walk the South Terrace tomorrow after luncheon. The dowager glanced at him, suddenly innocent. Robert continued. If you'd care to accompany her, I would be glad of your company as well. Rachel felt the invitation for what it was, not obligation, not rescue, a deliberate choice. I'd like that. Robert inclined his head. Then tomorrow. As Rachel left the study beside the dowager, she looked back once. Robert had not moved. His hand rested near the little fox, but he was staring at the open doorway through which she had gone. Behind her, the dowager said softly, 10 years. Rachel turned. Your Grace. The older woman kept walking. Nothing, my dear. But her eyes were bright, and Rachel understood enough to know that whatever had happened in Robert Whitaker's past, the room had not fallen silent merely because a duke had laughed. It had fallen silent because no one there had heard him do it for a very long time. By Wednesday afternoon, Rachel had decided that Foxgrove possessed two kinds of silence. One belonged to the great rooms themselves, where carpets swallowed footsteps and generations of portraits watched without comment. The other belonged to Robert Whitaker. It was not emptiness. It was restraint, chosen so carefully that every unguarded sound seemed to carry more weight than it should. The South Terrace lay bright beneath a pale October sun when Rachel joined the Dowager Duchess after luncheon. The older woman had wrapped herself in a dark wool shawl and declared the weather too decent to waste indoors. Robert appeared a few minutes later without announcing himself, walking from the direction of the stable yard with gloves in one hand. He fell into step on his mother's other side, which placed Rachel within easy conversation, without creating the intimacy of a private walk. For several minutes, the dowager discussed winter pruning, a subject on which she possessed strong opinions, and Robert appeared resigned to surrender. Rachel listened until the path widened near a stone balustrade overlooking the lower lawn. The dowager stopped to inspect a late rose that had somehow survived the season. Robert turned to Rachel. You have not attempted it again. She looked at him. Attempted what, Your Grace? His expression suggested he knew perfectly well that she understood. To make me laugh. Rachel glanced toward the dowager, who was occupied with the rose and very obviously not listening. I wasn't attempting it the first time. That was rather my point. There was no accusation in his voice, only curiosity, quiet and exact. Rachel rested one gloved hand lightly on the stone rail. If I tried again, it would become a performance. Robert waited. She continued. Something spontaneous becomes tiresome very quickly when everyone begins demanding a second demonstration. His gaze held hers. "And you dislike performing." "I dislike being assigned a role before I've agreed to it." The answer came more honestly than she intended. A flicker crossed his face. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. "So if I asked you to say something amusing now, I would become extremely dull on principle." The corner of his mouth shifted. Rachel noticed and pretended not to. "Cruel. Disciplined. My mother used the same word yesterday. Her Grace has excellent judgment." The Dowager turned from the rose. "I heard that. I intended you to," Rachel replied. "Flattery should never be wasted." The Dowager gave her a suspicious look and resumed walking. Robert's eyes remained on Rachel for a moment longer before he followed. The conversation moved to ordinary matters. A neighbor's harvest. A concert expected later in the month. The condition of one of the estate lanes. Yet Rachel became increasingly aware of Robert's manner beside her. He never rushed a sentence when he wished to answer quickly. There was sometimes a faint tightening at the beginning of a word, almost as if speech had caught against an unseen thread. No one had mentioned it. Rachel would not have noticed if Sir Vincent had not finished Robert's sentence at dinner. She wondered whether Robert expected interruption every time. A pause lasted longer than politeness preferred. Once, when the Dowager asked him whether a tenant meeting had been moved, Robert began, "It will be on Fry." The sound stopped, only for a breath. Rachel kept her gaze on the lawn. He completed the word himself. "Friday," his mother answered without ceremony. "Good. Thursday is impossible." Nothing more was made of it. Rachel felt rather than saw Robert look at her. She gave no sign she had noticed. The restraint required less effort than most people might have imagined. Widowhood had taught her many things, including the cruelty of excessive kindness. After her husband died, well-meaning acquaintances had watched her face for grief so closely that ordinary silence became evidence of suffering. Rachel had learned how exhausting it was to become an object of concern. She had no intention of doing the same to another person. When the Dowager finally tired and returned indoors, Robert accompanied them as far as the long gallery. "Mrs. Ludlow," he said before Rachel could turn toward the staircase. "There is something I neglected yesterday." She paused. "Your Grace, the fox." Rachel looked toward the corridor leading to his study. "Has it committed another offense?" "Several, but none recent." His eyes held the faintest trace of humor. "You judged it from a distance." The Dowager, who had been removing one glove finger by finger, said, "Robert, are you inviting Mrs. Ludlow to admire your youthful crimes? I am offering her the opportunity to revise an unfair opinion. Then I shall come too. I've waited nearly 30 years for someone else to tell you. It is ugly." Robert exhaled through his nose. "Mother, I'm only ensuring propriety." They entered the study together. The wooden fox remained exactly where Rachel had seen it the day before, beside the inkwell on Robert's desk. He picked it up and held it toward her. "You may examine the evidence." Rachel accepted the invitation, stepping nearer. Up close, the carving was worse and more charming. The front paws did not match. The tail was too large for the body. One side bore tiny parallel scratches where the knife had slipped. The chipped ear gave the creature an air of surviving criticism through stubbornness alone. "Well?" Robert asked. Rachel turned it carefully in her gloved fingers. "I withdraw my accusation against the bishop, completely. No, I merely think he has been demoted to an indignant rural dean." The Dowager laughed softly from the chair by the fire. Robert did not laugh, but warmth entered his face. "My tutor said the proportions were impossible." He was correct. You said that yesterday. Accuracy improves with repetition. Robert leaned one hip lightly against the desk. I kept it to spite him. For nearly 30 years, I am capable of commitment, to spite, when necessary. Rachel looked again at the fox. Why this one? His expression changed, becoming quieter. Because it was mine. She waited. He seemed almost surprised that she did not immediately ask for more. After a moment, he continued of his own accord. Most things in my childhood were chosen for me. Tutors, coats, horses, lessons, rooms, expectations. He nodded toward the carving. No one chose that. Rachel's hand stilled. The object ceased to be merely comic. It was not a relic of sorrow or a precious heirloom. It was proof that Robert Whitaker had once made something useless simply because he wanted to. Then I understand why you kept it, she said. Do you? Something doesn't have to be beautiful to be entirely yours. His gaze settled on her with such steadiness that Rachel suddenly became conscious of the small distance between them. No, he said, it does not. She handed the fox back. Their gloved fingers met at its uneven base. The contact lasted scarcely a second. Neither had reached for the other. Neither could pretend not to have felt it. Rachel withdrew first. Robert's hand closed around the carving, but his eyes stayed on her. There was nothing improper in the touch. 1,000 drawing rooms contained more intimate accidents every day. Yet something had changed, subtle enough that the Dowager's quiet movement near the fire sounded unexpectedly loud. Robert set the fox back on the desk in its usual place. He did not manufacture another reason for their hands to meet. Rachel was grateful for that restraint, though gratitude was not quite the right word. Respect came closer. You asked yesterday whether I knew Mr. Pritchard, she said, choosing firmer ground. Robert's attention sharpened at once. I did. I do not know him personally. I only saw him here on Monday. A small pause followed. Here, in the entrance hall. Robert became completely still. Rachel remembered the cream card in the rector's hand and Lady Josephine's quiet instructions to the porter. She also remembered what she did not know. She had no idea whether Josephine had acted under some established authority, so she gave him only the fact that belonged to her. He came to call, Your Grace. Robert's fingers rested beside the wooden fox. Did he? Yes. The warmth that had entered his face disappeared, replaced by something far more controlled. Then I appear to have misunderstood something. By Saturday morning, Robert Whitaker had spent 3 days doing something. Rachel suspected he disliked almost as much as being watched. He had waited. He had not summoned the porter in anger after their conversation on Wednesday. He had not demanded that Rachel repeat herself before witnesses. He had not confronted Lady Josephine at dinner or permitted Sir Vincent to turn the matter into another smooth explanation offered on his behalf. Instead, Foxgrove had continued through 2 ordinary days of meals, correspondence, wet lawns, and callers who did not arrive. Rachel had begun to wonder whether Robert intended to let the discrepancy rest until, shortly after 11 on Saturday, a footman found her in the morning room and said His Grace requested her presence in his study. The Dowager Duchess was already there when Rachel entered. So were Sir Vincent and Lady Josephine. The wooden fox remained on Robert's desk beside the inkwell, exactly where it had stood before. Rachel noticed it only because the room had become associated with that small, improbable glimpse of another Robert. Today there was no amusement in him. He stood near the fireplace with one hand behind his back, composed enough that anyone who did not know better might have mistaken composure for ease. Mrs. Ludlow, he said, thank you for coming. Rachel inclined her head. Your Grace. Lady Josephine was seated near the window, elegant in dark green silk, her expression carrying mild concern rather than defensiveness. Sir Vincent remained standing. He looked less concerned than inconvenienced. Robert gestured toward the chair beside his mother. Please sit. Rachel did. He remained standing. On Wednesday, you told me that Mr. Pritchard came to Foxgrove on Monday. Yes. I want to be precise about what you personally saw. The wording impressed her, not what she suspected, not what she believed. Of course. Where were you? In the entrance hall, waiting to be shown upstairs after my arrival. And Mr. Pritchard? He entered through the front doors and asked the porter whether you were at home. Robert's gaze moved briefly toward Josephine, then returned to Rachel. Did anyone tell him I was not? Lady Josephine said you were not receiving callers. Josephine lifted one hand. Robert, I can explain perfectly well. He looked at her. You will. The sentence was quiet enough to make interruption more difficult than a raised voice would have done. Rachel continued only after he returned his attention to her. Lady Josephine asked the porter to give Mr. Pritchard the usual message. The porter wrote on one of the cream Foxgrove cards and handed it to him. Robert's expression tightened. Did you read the card? Not closely. I was several feet away. What did you see? Rachel chose her words with care, enough to understand that it was a refusal in your name. I cannot honestly give you the exact sentence. Sir Vincent exhaled as if this distinction proved the whole concern trivial. Robert did not. Thank you. He turned to Josephine. What message was sent? Lady Josephine folded her hands in her lap. A conventional one. Nothing dramatic, Mr. Pritchard arrived at an inconvenient hour, and I understood that you did not wish to be disturbed. From whom did you understand that? From 10 years of knowing you. Sir Vincent stepped nearer. Robert, this is unnecessary. Josephine has screened callers for you for years. So have I. You have always preferred it. Half the county would spend its life in your entrance hall if someone did not exercise judgment. Robert's eyes rested on him. I know what I have preferred. Then we agree. No. The single word altered the room. Vincent's agreeable expression shifted. Robert continued. I have permitted tedious callers to be discouraged when I am occupied. I have permitted messages to be taken. I have permitted you to tell people that I am unavailable when I am unavailable. His attention moved to Josephine. Did I tell you on Monday that I did not wish to see Mr. Pritchard? Not in those words. Did I tell you at all? You had estate correspondence. You had only just arrived from London. I knew you would not want. Did I tell you? Josephine's mouth tightened. No, the Dowager Duchess said nothing. Rachel could feel the old woman's attention moving between her son and the Keens, but she did not intervene. Robert looked toward the window. Beyond it, the October sky hung low and grey over the lawns. I expected Mr. Pritchard, he said. I asked him in September to call when I was next at Foxgrove. Josephine appeared genuinely surprised. You never mentioned that. That is precisely the difficulty. Vincent gave a short, patient laugh. Robert, surely you cannot expect every household arrangement to depend upon whether you happen to mention a rector. Robert turned back. I expect my personal refusals to depend upon whether I have personally refused someone. The sentence came easily until the final phrase. The beginning of the next did not. From this morning, no written message will be sent as my personal instruction unless I have. His voice caught. It was small. A momentary resistance at the beginning of the word. Rachel saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. Vincent shifted immediately. Unless you've approved it, naturally. We can have Hales bring every. Rachel kept her eyes on Robert. She did not turn toward Vincent. She did not lower her gaze in embarrassment. She did not pretend nothing had happened with exaggerated politeness. She simply waited. Robert's eyes met hers for an instant. The silence stretched one breath longer. Then he completed the sentence himself. Initialed it. Vincent stopped. Robert continued, his voice measured but clear. No card, note, or written message will claim to express my personal wish unless it bears my initials. If I am unavailable, the household may say I am unavailable. No one will decide whom I wish to see. Lady Josephine rose. You make it sound as though we have been impersonating you. Have you? The question landed without heat. Josephine stared at him. Of course not. Then the rule should inconvenience no one. The Dowager Duchess's eyes lowered, concealing something that might have been approval. Vincent's face remained controlled, but Rachel saw calculation enter it. This is because of one country clergyman? He asked. Robert answered before anyone else could. This is because I asked Mrs. Ludlow what she saw, and she told me without improving the facts. Rachel felt the words more sharply than praise. He had not thanked her for loyalty. He had not called her brave. He had valued accuracy. In a house where people seemed forever translating Robert into something more convenient, accuracy had begun to feel unexpectedly intimate. Josephine turned toward Rachel. You must feel very important. The attack was mild enough to deny afterward. Rachel had known such sentences all her adult life. No, she said, only present. Josephine's eyes cooled. Robert looked at Rachel, and something passed through his expression that was not amusement, but came from the same hidden place. That will be all, Josephine. Sir Vincent frowned. Robert, for now. Vincent took the warning. He offered the Dowager a formal inclination of his head and followed his wife out. The door closed. The room seemed larger without them. The Dowager Duchess rose almost immediately. I shall find Hales and make certain he understands the new rule. Robert looked at his mother. You need not. I know. That is why I intend to. She left before he could object. Rachel stood. She expected Robert to dismiss her as well. Instead, he remained by the fire, silent. You were careful, he said at last. About what? You did not tell me you knew what was written on the card. Because I don't know the exact words. Most people would have supplied them anyway. Rachel considered that. Most people dislike leaving empty spaces in a story. His mouth tightened faintly. You do not? I dislike filling them with things I haven't earned. A pause came. This one was different, not obstruction. Thought. Robert looked toward the desk, then back to her. When I stopped over that word just now, you waited. Rachel did not insult him by denying it. Yes, you did not look away. Would you have preferred me to? His answer took a moment. No. Then I'm glad I didn't. The first sound of his reply caught. Rachel waited again, not as a demonstration and not as kindness, simply because the sentence belonged to him. So am I, he finished. Their eyes held. No touch followed. None was needed. Something quieter had passed between them. Recognition without rescue. Robert broke the moment first by turning toward the window. Mr. Pritchard may have been told more than once that I did not wish to see him. Rachel heard the shift from personal vulnerability back to the unresolved problem. Do you think so? I do not know. His voice hardened slightly. But I intend to. Rachel thought of the cream card leaving Foxgrove in the rector's hand and of Josephine's phrase, the usual message. One refusal could be explained. A usual refusal was something else entirely. By Tuesday evening, Rachel had begun to understand that Robert Whitaker's silences were not all the same. Some were deliberate, some were private, some arrived because he wished to choose a word carefully, and some, she now knew, caught him before the word had fully formed. The distinction mattered. It mattered more than she had expected. Foxgrove's dining room was crowded that night with county guests, several gentlemen from neighboring estates, 2 ladies who spoke earnestly about parish subscriptions, and a retired colonel who considered every subject improved by the memory of a horse. Candles burned steadily in the silver branches. Rain whispered against the long windows. Rachel sat midway down the table, close enough to see Robert clearly, but far enough that no one could mistake the placement for favor. Lady Josephine occupied the position of a woman who had spent years assuming the room would organize itself around her competence. Sir Vincent sat near Robert. The arrangement appeared ordinary. Rachel no longer believed it was. Conversation moved from harvest conditions to local road repairs, and then to a proposed county subscription for improvements near a troublesome stretch of parish boundary. One of the visiting gentlemen, Lord Ashwell, addressed Robert directly. "Carringford, are you still supporting the surveyor's recommendation? There's some concern the southern route will cost considerably more than expected." Robert set down his wineglass. "I support the surveyor's recommendation if the revised measurements confirm that the drainage can be." The sentence caught, not dramatically. The first sound of the next word remained behind his teeth. Rachel saw the familiar tightening at his jaw. Vincent entered the pause with practiced ease, managed without rebuilding the lower retaining wall. "Exactly. Robert's position is sensible. There's no point wasting subscription money on stonework if the drainage alone will solve it." Several men nodded. Lord Ashwell opened his mouth to answer. Robert lifted one hand. "Vincent." The baronets stopped, the table quieted by degrees. Robert looked at him directly. I had not finished. Vincent smiled as though they shared a joke. "Of course, I was only saving you the trouble." The words were mild. Rachel felt their weight all the same. Robert's fingers rested flat against the cloth. "Do not." The silence that followed was different from the one that had come before. No one rushed to repair it. Rachel kept her gaze on Robert. She did not look down to offer privacy. She did not soften her expression. She simply waited. His eyes moved once toward her. The caught word came again. "Managed," he said. Then, more steadily, "If the revised measurements confirm that the drainage can be managed without rebuilding the lower retaining wall, I will support the cheaper course. If they do not, I will not ask 3 parishes to maintain a bad solution merely because it costs less this year." Lord Ashwell nodded slowly. "That seems plain enough." The retired colonel murmured agreement. Conversation resumed. But Vincent did not. Rachel saw a small change in Lady Josephine's face. Not anger, calculation. Robert continued through the rest of dinner with measured composure. Twice he paused before answering questions. No one interrupted. Rachel wondered whether the room understood why. She suspected most of them had simply recognized a boundary after seeing it enforced. Later, when the ladies withdrew, Rachel expected the evening to dissolve into cards and music. Instead, the Dowager Duchess intercepted her near the drawing-room doors. "Walk with me," she said. "My knees have been insulted by dining chairs." Rachel obeyed. The older woman led her into the long gallery, where portraits alternated with tall windows reflecting candle light from the sconces. The doors at both ends remained open. Servants crossed occasionally in the distance. Their pace was unhurried enough for propriety and too purposeful to suggest privacy. Robert joined them several minutes later. The Dowager looked at him. "I thought you were drinking port." "I was, and it remained in the glass." "A tragedy." She turned to Rachel. "I am going to sit beneath the Reynolds and pretend this bench was designed for comfort. You two may continue walking where I can still see you." Robert's expression suggested this arrangement had been planned without consulting him. Rachel suspected it had. The Dowager lowered herself onto a cushioned bench with the satisfaction of a general securing favorable ground. Rachel and Robert walked on at a measured pace. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence felt unexpectedly companionable. Then Robert said, "You waited again." Rachel glanced at him. "At dinner?" "Yes. You asked Sir Vincent not to speak for you." "I did." It seemed discourteous to ignore the request immediately. His mouth moved faintly. "You make courtesy sound almost severe." "It often is." They reached the end of the gallery and turned. Robert's hands were clasped behind his back. Most people do not know what to do with silence. Rachel looked toward the portraits rather than directly at him. Most people are afraid silence means they have failed. And you are not. Sometimes. He waited. She continued. "After my husband died, people were very kind." The word carried more complexity than kindness usually deserved. Robert understood that. Too kind, relentlessly kind. If I paused before answering, they assumed I was overcome by grief. If I did not eat enough, someone watched my plate. If I left a room, someone followed. Silence became evidence. A quiet afternoon became concern. Eventually, I learned that being helped can become another form of being observed. Robert's pace slowed. "You resented them. Some of them. Did you tell them?" "Rarely. Grief makes gratitude feel compulsory." He absorbed that without answering at once. When he did, the first word came carefully. "I have spent years being helped before anyone asked whether help was wanted." Rachel turned toward him. "Then perhaps that is why you noticed when I waited." "Perhaps." They walked several more steps. "Vincent believes interruption is efficiency," Robert said. "Josephine believes prevention is kindness." For a long time I found both explanations convenient. Convenience can be very persuasive, especially when the alternative is being watched struggle over a word. His voice remained level, but Rachel heard what it cost him to say it. She did not answer quickly. She did not say that no one worthy would judge him. She did not offer reassurance too large for what she actually knew. "That must be exhausting," she said. Robert looked at her. "Not the speaking." "No, the anticipation." Rachel nodded. "Yes." Something in his face eased. They had nearly reached the Dowager again when he stopped. Rachel stopped too. He looked down at her right hand, where it rested lightly against the folds of her gown. His own hand moved, then halted before touching her. The restraint was unmistakable. "Mrs. Ludlow." His voice was quieter now. "May I take your hand?" The question startled her more than an uninvited touch would have. Men of Robert's rank were accustomed to assuming room would be made for them. He was asking for inches. Rachel looked at his face. There was no performance in it, no flirtation designed for effect, only deliberate uncertainty and the willingness to hear no. She turned her gloved hand slightly, palm inward. "Yes." Robert took it. Gently. His fingers closed around hers, without possession, without urgency. For several breaths they stood in the gallery, with the Dowager visible. Behind them, the doors open, the household moving at the edges of propriety. Rachel felt the warmth of his hand through kid leather. It was not the accidental brush over the wooden fox. There was nothing accidental now. Robert's thumb did not stroke her knuckles. He did not draw her nearer. He simply held her hand because he had asked, and she had agreed. The simplicity of it made her chest tighten. Most people, he said, would consider this a very small thing. Rachel met his eyes. Most people aren't here. A quiet breath left him. Not laughter, but something softened by it. He released her before the moment could become greedy. Rachel's fingers remained warm after his hand was gone. The Dowager was studying a portrait with suspicious dedication. Robert resumed walking, though more slowly than before. There was a night 10 years ago, he said, when everyone in the room waited for me to fail. Rachel did not interrupt. He looked ahead toward the far end of the gallery. If you will walk with my mother on Friday, I think I owe you the truth of it. Rachel answered without hesitation. I'll come. He looked at her then, and for the first time she understood that whatever had happened 10 years before, he was not asking her to rescue him from it. He was asking whether she would hear it from his own mouth. Friday came with a thin silver light over Foxgrove and a wind strong enough to strip the last yellow leaves from the beeches beyond the south terrace. Rachel had expected Robert to choose the privacy of his study for what he had promised to tell her. Instead, shortly after luncheon, the Dowager Duchess appeared in the morning room, wearing stout walking shoes, and announced that the terrace would be preferable because people confess more honestly when no carpet is available to stare at. Rachel suspected the older woman understood far more than she admitted. They walked slowly beneath the stone balustrade, the Dowager between them at first, until she stopped beside a sheltered bench overlooking the lower lawns. My knees have remembered that I am not 30, she said. You two may continue to the yew walk and back. I shall remain here, where propriety can see me even if I cannot hear every foolish thing my son says. Robert gave his mother a look that would have silenced most people. The Dowager merely settled her shawl. Rachel and Robert moved on. For several moments he said nothing. Rachel did not fill the quiet. She had learned by now that his silences deserved the same courtesy as his words. At the turn of the terrace, where the house hid them from the wind but not from the Dowager's view, Robert stopped. His hands were clasped behind his back. You asked me nothing after Tuesday. Rachel looked at him. You said you would tell me when you were ready. Most people would have asked. Most people are very curious. And you are not. I am extremely curious. The faintest warmth touched his expression. Then why wait? Because curiosity doesn't create a right. He looked away toward the lawns. The answer seemed to strike somewhere deeper than she intended. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I have always had difficulty with speech when I am watched too closely. Rachel did not react. She simply listened. Not constantly. Not enough that I could avoid speaking in ordinary life. But when I was a boy, if I knew a room was waiting for me to say something correctly, the first sound sometimes would not come. The harder I tried to force it, the worse it became. His jaw tightened before the next sentence. My father considered it a defect of discipline. Rachel felt anger rise, but she kept it from interrupting him. Robert continued. Tutors tried breathing exercises. One made me repeat speeches before mirrors. Another insisted hesitation was vanity. I learned to hide most of it. By the time I inherited the title, I had become very good at preparing every sentence before I spoke. That sounds exhausting. His eyes turned to her. You said the same thing in the gallery. Because it still sounds exhausting. A small breath left him. Then he faced forward again. 10 years ago, I was expected to address a gathering here at Foxgrove. County gentlemen, neighbours, families I had known since childhood. Nothing remarkable. I had given speeches before. His mouth tightened. That evening, I knew a woman was watching me. Rachel heard the change in his tone. Someone important to you? I believed she would become my wife. The words came evenly, but the control beneath them was severe. There had been no formal announcement, but both families understood the direction of things. I thought she understood me better than most. Rachel said nothing. I began the speech. The first paragraph was simple. Then I reached a sentence I had practiced perhaps 20 times. One word would not come. He stopped. The silence on the terrace seemed to widen around them. No one laughed at first, he said. That was worse. They waited. Rachel remembered his line from Tuesday. Everyone in the room waited for me to fail. I tried again. The word caught harder. Someone shifted a chair. Someone coughed. I heard every sound in that room, as though it were beside my ear. His voice faltered briefly now, not from the old obstruction, but from memory. He did not turn away. I finished eventually. And afterward? Rachel asked softly. Robert's expression changed. The anger there was old enough to have frozen into something colder. Later that evening, I entered the card room and heard her repeating the broken phrase. Rachel's heart tightened. She was imitating you? Perfectly. His mouth curved without humor, better than I could say it myself. Rachel looked down for one moment, mastering the impulse to offer easy condemnation. He did not need outrage performed for him. Were others listening? Enough. Did she know you were there? Not until they did. He paused. She apologized. Then, the following morning, she told me she could not marry a man whose weakness could become public entertainment so easily. Rachel's hands tightened at her sides. That was not weakness. It felt like it. Of course it did. Robert looked at her sharply, perhaps expecting contradiction. Rachel held his gaze. Being humiliated can make anything feel like weakness. That doesn't make the judgment true. Something in his face shifted. He looked suddenly tired rather than cold. I ended the understanding. I also decided I would never again give a room enough of myself to make ridicule possible. So you stopped laughing. Gradually. He glanced toward Foxgrove's windows. I stopped doing many things gradually. The wind moved through the bare branches below them. Rachel waited until he continued. Vincent began stepping in when I hesitated. At first, I welcomed it. He was quick, socially effortless. If I stopped over a word, he supplied it, and the room moved on. Josephine began handling callers, because she said I should not waste energy on people who wanted something from me. I told myself they were making life easier, and perhaps, at first, they were. Robert studied her. You are being generous. No, I am being precise. Help can begin as help and become something else later. His gaze lowered. I allowed it. Yes, the blunt agreement surprised him. Rachel continued before he could mistake it for accusation. You also did not authorize them to invent your wishes. No, both things can be true. He was silent for several seconds. You do not make excuses for me. Would you like me to? No, then I won't. The first sound of his next word caught. Rachel saw it happen. Robert saw that she saw. Neither pretended otherwise. He finished the word himself. Good. Rachel smiled faintly. That sounded expensive. It was. For the first time since they had stopped walking, the tension around his mouth eased. Then his eyes moved toward the hand hanging at Rachel's side. Tuesday, he had asked to take it. Today, she understood that asking him to repeat that gesture would make comfort another task he was expected to perform correctly. So Rachel made her own choice. She lifted her right hand between them and turned it palm upward. She said nothing. Robert looked at it, then at her. The question in his face was unmistakable. Rachel did not move closer. She simply left the offer where it was. Slowly, Robert placed his hand in hers. His fingers closed around her gloved palm. This time, neither counted the breaths. They stood in the cold autumn light, with the Dowager still visible at the far end of the terrace, their hands joined without urgency. Robert's shoulders lowered by a fraction. "When I laughed the other day," he said, "for one moment I thought the room had become that room again." Rachel's fingers tightened gently around his. "And then I looked at you." His thumb remained still against her glove. "You were embarrassed because you thought you had offended me. You were not pleased with yourself. You were not waiting to see what you had accomplished." Rachel's chest tightened. "I thought I had insulted a duke in his own study. You had insulted a fox, a defenseless one. He has survived worse." The shadow of amusement passed between them, quieter than laughter. Robert looked down at their joined hands. "I understood then that you had laughed with the world, not at me." Rachel let the silence settle before she answered. What happened 10 years ago belonged to people who chose cruelty. It doesn't mean every silence, since belongs to them. Robert's eyes lifted to hers. For several long seconds, he said nothing. He did not need to. Their hands remained joined until the Dowager Duchess rose from her bench and began adjusting her shawl. Only then did Rachel loosen her fingers. Robert released her at once. There was no claim in the gesture, no reluctance turned into pressure. They began walking back. Halfway toward the Dowager, Robert said, "If Vincent and Josephine have been deciding more than I permitted, I will have to learn how far it went." Rachel looked toward the great house ahead. "Then perhaps the most difficult question is not what they did. What is it? Who has spent years believing you wanted them gone?" Robert stopped for half a step before continuing. The thought had reached him. This time Rachel knew he would not be able to leave the empty spaces unexamined. By Monday evening, Foxgrove had acquired the strained politeness of a house in which everyone knew a rule had changed and no one yet knew what the change would cost. Rachel felt it before the first county carriage reached the doors. Servants moved with unusual precision. Lady Josephine spoke pleasantly to everyone and warmly to no one. Sir Vincent had become more agreeable with every passing day, which Rachel had learned was often a dangerous form of irritation. Robert remained composed, but he no longer allowed Vincent to answer even the smallest question directed to him. The new rule concerning written messages had also taken effect. Rachel had seen 2 cream Foxgrove cards carried into Robert's study for his initials, rather than sent directly from the hall. It should have settled the matter. Instead, by 7 o'clock, as guests arrived for dinner beneath the lamps of the great entrance hall, Lady Josephine approached Rachel with another cream card in her hand. Mrs. Ludlow. Rachel had just surrendered her cloak to a maid. Around them, gentlemen exchanged greetings, ladies adjusted gloves, and Hales directed footmen toward the growing line of carriages outside. Lady Josephine smiled, with the smooth regret of someone delivering unfortunate news she had no intention of regretting. "A word, if you please." Rachel stepped aside, though not so far that the open hall ceased to surround them. Josephine extended the card. "His Grace has reconsidered the evening." Rachel took it. The small fox device was impressed at the top. Beneath it, in a neat hand, were words that made the noise of the entrance hall seem to recede. "By His Grace's direction, Mrs. Ludlow is not expected below this evening." Rachel read the sentence twice. Her first instinct arrived before thought. Accept it. Smile. Say there had been a headache. Spare everyone discomfort. Disappear neatly enough that no one would have to admit she had been removed. The impulse was so familiar that for one shameful second it felt like good manners. Josephine watched her. I am sure you understand. Rachel lifted her gaze. No. The answer was quiet. Josephine's smile thinned. I beg your pardon? I do not understand. Several guests had moved past them. A young married woman nearby stopped speaking to her husband. Rachel became aware that the conversation nearest them had softened. Josephine lowered her voice. His Grace feels that recent attention has become unfortunate. You are an intelligent woman. Surely you can see the wisdom in avoiding further speculation. Rachel looked again at the card. Did His Grace write this? The message is clear. That was not my question. Josephine's eyes cooled. Must you make this unpleasant? Rachel felt heat climb into her face. Humiliation demanded speed. It wanted her gone before anyone could watch her. Decide whether she had been dismissed. She thought of Robert on the terrace 3 days earlier, his hand in hers, telling her how 10 years of anticipation had taught him to surrender words before they became difficult. She thought of the first cream card leaving Foxgrove in Mr. Pritchard's hand. Then she folded neither herself nor the card. If His Grace wishes me gone, Rachel said, I will hear it from His Grace. Josephine's expression sharpened. Do not mistake his recent courtesy for an invitation to challenge his judgment. I am challenging no judgment I have heard from him. You are creating a scene. Rachel glanced around the entrance hall. More people were listening now. She disliked that. She disliked even more the possibility that dislike would decide for her. Then let us avoid one. She turned to Hales. Would you ask a footman to carry a note to His Grace directly? The porter hesitated only a fraction. Yes, Mrs. Ludlow. Josephine stepped forward. That is unnecessary. Rachel looked at her. If it is unnecessary, His Grace can tell me so. The Dowager Duchess appeared at the drawing-room doorway, taking in the arrangement with one swift glance. Rachel did not ask her to intervene. She requested paper. A footman brought a small tray from the writing table near the hall. Rachel wrote only one sentence. Your Grace, I have received a written instruction that I am not expected below this evening. Please tell me whether it is yours. She sealed it and gave it to the footman. Then she retained the cream card in her own hand. I will wait in Her Grace's sitting room, she said. The Dowager crossed the hall. You will wait with me. Josephine's lips parted. The Dowager did not look at her. Rachel followed the older woman through the adjoining passage, aware of whispers stirring behind them like silk dragged over carpet. She sat in the Dowager's private sitting room with the card resting across her gloved fingers. No one tried to take it. Less than 5 minutes passed before footsteps approached. Robert entered without Vincent and without Josephine. His expression was controlled, but his eyes went first to Rachel and then to the card. You received a message. It was not a question. Yes. May I see it? Rachel held it out, but did not release it. Robert read the words while it remained in her possession. Something in his face went still. I did not send this. The Dowager exhaled slowly. Rachel had not realized how tightly she had been holding herself until the breath left her too. Thank you, she said. Robert looked at her. You should not have needed to ask. He turned toward the open door. Come with me. Rachel did not move immediately. Where? The question stopped him. He looked back, and she saw him understand that invitation was not command. To the hall, he said, only if you wish the message corrected before the people who saw it delivered. Rachel looked at the card. The humiliation had been public enough to produce witnesses. A private correction would leave room for Josephine's version to live. "Yes," she said. "I wish that." They returned together with the Dowager a few steps behind. The entrance hall had filled. Lady Josephine stood near the drawing-room doors beside Vincent. Conversation faded when Robert entered. He did not position Rachel behind him. He stood at her side. "Josephine," he said, "did you dictate a message telling Mrs. Ludlow that she was not expected below tonight?" Josephine held herself very straight. "I sent what discretion required. Did I direct you to send it?" "Robert, you have been under unnecessary scrutiny, Mrs. Ludlow's presence has encouraged talk, and I believed. Did I direct you to send it?" Silence. "No." Robert's voice caught slightly on the beginning of his next sentence. Vincent shifted. Rachel saw the instinct before he acted. This time, Robert did not need her to look away or rescue him. He waited through the obstruction and finished himself. "Then you invented my wishes." A murmur moved through the nearest guests. Josephine flushed. "I anticipated what you would eventually decide." "You will not do so again." Vincent stepped forward. "Robert, surely this can be discussed privately." Mrs. Ludlow was corrected publicly. The correction will be public. He turned enough that the room could hear him without making Rachel the center of a spectacle. "Mrs. Ludlow was given a message in my name. It was not mine. She is here by my mother's invitation and with my welcome." Rachel felt every eye in the hall. The instinct to disappear returned. She stayed where she was. Robert looked to her rather than reaching for the card. "Do you wish to show it?" The question mattered. "Yes." Rachel held it where Josephine could see it. "This is the message I received." She did not hand it over. "I will keep it." "Of course," Robert said. Then he addressed Hales. "From this moment, neither Sir Vincent nor Lady Josephine is to handle my personal correspondence or issue any message in my name. Anything purporting to state my personal wish comes directly to me." Hales bowed. "Yes, Your Grace." Josephine stared at Robert as though he had humiliated her, rather than withdrawn an authority that was never hers. Vincent recovered faster. "You are making a grave mistake. That remains mine to make." Dinner proceeded because aristocratic society could survive almost anything if soup was waiting. Yet the room had changed. Rachel noticed guests looking toward Josephine with new uncertainty. Robert asked Rachel no comforting questions across the table and made no display of special favor. He had corrected the lie, not converted her humiliation into courtship theater. She was grateful for that more than she could say. After dinner, as guests began moving toward the drawing room, Rachel paused near the entrance hall to place the cream card inside her reticule. She would keep it. She had almost closed the clasp when Vincent's low voice carried from several feet away. He had drawn Robert aside near the base of the staircase, not realizing Rachel remained within hearing distance. "Do you understand what you have done?" Vincent asked. Robert's answer was calm. "Yes, no. If you remove us from this, half the county will discover how much of your life we have managed for you." Rachel's fingers stilled on the clasp. Vincent continued, quieter still. "They will discover how dependent you have been." Robert did not answer immediately. When he finally did, every word belonged to him. Then perhaps they should. Tuesday morning arrived with a letter that should never have existed. Rachel was in the breakfast room with the Dowager Duchess when Hales entered, carrying a sealed note on a silver salver. The porter's expression was controlled. But Rachel had begun to recognize the particular stiffness of a servant forced to stand near trouble, while pretending there was none. "For his grace, your grace," he said to the Dowager, then corrected himself at once. "Forgive me." It was delivered by hand and marked urgent. The Dowager glanced toward the door. "Robert is in his study. Take it to him directly." Hales bowed and withdrew. Rachel returned to her tea. But the cream card from the previous evening rested inside her reticule on the chair beside her, and its presence made ordinary breakfast feel deceptive. She had slept badly, not because Josephine had tried to send her upstairs. Rachel had survived social slights before. What troubled her was the confidence with which Josephine had assumed she could decide what Robert wanted, then present that decision as fact. It was not merely cruelty. It was occupation. 10 minutes later, Robert entered the breakfast room with the opened note in his hand. He did not sit. The Dowager looked at his face and set down her cup. "What is it?" "Lady Harbury has written to ask whether Saturday's receiving afternoon is cancelled." Rachel looked up. "Cancelled?" Robert's gaze moved to her, then back to his mother. "She received a message this morning stating that I am indisposed and will not receive callers." The Dowager's expression hardened. "Did you send it?" "No." The word required no effort. Robert folded the note once. "Nor did I authorize anyone else to send it." Rachel thought of Vincent's warning the night before. "Half the county will discover how dependent you have been." The counterattack had begun before breakfast. "How many messages?" the Dowager asked. "I do not yet know." Robert turned as Hales reappeared in the doorway. "Hales, Your Grace, were cancellation messages sent from this house this morning?" The porter hesitated. Rachel saw fear move through him before discipline concealed it. "Some cards were prepared, Your Grace." "By whose instruction?" Hales looked toward the corridor as though the walls themselves had loyalties. Lady Josephine spoke with Mr. Wayne, the second footman, shortly after 8. Sir Vincent later said the household was to understand that Saturday's gathering would not proceed. Robert's jaw tightened. "Did either of them show you my initials?" "No, Your Grace." "Did they say I had changed the rule established on Saturday?" "No, Your Grace." Robert nodded once. "Thank you. Send Wayne to my study when he is free. No further cancellation leaves Foxgrove." "Yes, Your Grace." Hales withdrew. The Dowager pushed back her chair. "Then we send corrected invitations immediately." Robert looked toward her. "I will. You have estate work, and I have spent 40 years telling people when they may enter houses. Mother, do not make rank more complicated than it is. You are the Duke. I am the woman who raised you. We both possess stationery." Rachel almost smiled, but Robert's attention remained on the opened letter. "If corrections go out too quickly," he said, "Josephine will say there was merely clerical confusion." "And if they do not go out," Rachel said, "people may believe the cancellation." Robert looked at her. Yes, she did not offer more. The choice belonged to him. After a moment, he crossed to the sideboard and placed Lady Harbury's note beside his plate. "Saturday will proceed." The words were quiet. "If half the county discovers I can be uncomfortable in a room, half the county will survive the revelation." The Dowager's mouth softened. "Good." Robert glanced at Rachel. "I will send direct corrections to every household we know received a card." Rachel considered the problem. "What about the households you do not know about?" His expression sharpened. "Precisely." The Dowager tapped one finger against the tablecloth. "Mr. Pritchard lives less than 4 miles away. Lady Fenmore is another 2 miles beyond the church road. Both have called here often enough in years past. If someone has been refusing people in Robert's name, they may know more than we do. Robert looked toward Rachel, but did not ask her to go. That omission mattered. Rachel felt it as clearly as she had felt his hand in hers on Friday. He was not replacing Josephine and Vincent with another person assigned to manage what he found difficult. The Dowager turned to Rachel. "I intend to call on both tomorrow. You may come if you like, but you are under no obligation to involve yourself further." Rachel looked at Robert. He remained silent, waiting. "I would like to come," she said. "I saw Mr. Pritchard turned away. If he was given other messages, I can at least tell him what I witnessed on Monday." Robert's shoulders eased by a fraction. "Only if that is your choice." "It is. Then tell me only what you wish to tell me afterward." Rachel held his gaze. "I will tell you what matters." The faintest warmth crossed his face. "That sounds dangerously efficient. I have been accused of usefulness. Unfairly, as I recall." The Dowager looked between them and reached for her tea with unnecessary concentration. The moment might have become lighter, but footsteps sounded in the corridor. Sir Vincent entered without waiting to be announced. He carried no apology. "Robert, we need to speak." Robert's expression closed. "We are speaking." Vincent glanced at Rachel and the Dowager, clearly preferring another audience. "Privately. If this concerns Saturday, it need not be private." Vincent's mouth tightened. "Very well, then let us be practical. You have spent a decade avoiding precisely this sort of spectacle. Now you intend to invite half Kent here, so they can inspect whether you can manage conversations without assistance." Rachel saw the cruelty beneath the reasonable tone. Robert did too, his hand flattened against the back of a chair. Saturday was already arranged. Before this nonsense began, before I discovered messages were being sent in my name. Vincent sighed. "We were protecting you." Robert's first reply caught. The word resisted him. Vincent leaned forward instinctively, ready to supply it. Robert raised one hand. The gesture was small, absolute. Vincent stopped. Rachel did nothing. Robert finished. "Protecting me from whom?" "From people who enjoy weakness." "Then perhaps you should not have made my weakness the foundation of your authority." Vincent went still. The Dowager said nothing. Robert continued, more slowly now. "Saturday proceeds. Corrected invitations will be sent today. No one is to cancel anything in my name." Vincent's composure cracked only at the edges. "You are making yourself vulnerable because one woman has encouraged you to resent people who have spent years making your life easier." Rachel felt the accusation turn toward her before Vincent looked at her. Robert answered first. "Mrs. Ludlow has not asked me to do anything. She hardly needs to. Do not speak of her as if she is not sitting here." Vincent's gaze shifted back to Robert. "You will regret this. That remains possible." Robert picked up Lady Harbury's letter. "It also remains mine." Vincent left without another word. The room stayed quiet after the door closed. Rachel did not thank Robert for defending her. That would have reduced what had just happened to gallantry, and it was larger than that. He had refused a structure, not merely an insult. By afternoon, corrected messages were being written under Robert's direct supervision. Rachel passed through the entrance hall, on her way to the Dowager's sitting room, and found Hales standing rigid beside the console table, while Vincent spoke to him in a low voice near the staircase. Rachel would have walked on if Robert had not appeared from the west corridor at the same moment. "You understand," Vincent was saying, "that after Saturday your position here may no longer be suitable. A house requires discretion from its porter." Hales had gone pale. Robert stopped 3 paces away. Hales, both men turned. Robert looked first at the porter. "You will remain in your position." Hales swallowed. "Yes, Your Grace." Then Robert looked at Vincent. "You have no authority to dismiss my servants. I was offering advice. Do not offer it again." Vincent's face hardened. Robert did not raise his voice. "Hales, if anyone threatens your place because you answer my questions truthfully, you will come directly to me." "Yes, Your Grace. That is all." Vincent walked away. Hales bowed, visibly relieved but careful not to show too much of it. Rachel remained near the corridor entrance. Robert noticed her only after the porter returned to his duties. For a moment neither spoke. Then Rachel said, "You did not need me for that." Robert understood. His expression softened, not into dependence, but something steadier. "No." Rachel nodded. "Good." He looked toward the front doors, where another footman was carrying corrected invitations toward the waiting groom. "Tomorrow you may discover how many people were told I did not want them." Rachel followed his gaze. "Perhaps. I find I am not looking forward to it." "You do not have to." He glanced at her. "No." The pause came, but this time it belonged entirely to thought. "I only have to hear it." Friday morning was clear enough for carriage travel, and Rachel was relieved by it. Rain would have given everyone an excuse to postpone difficult truths. The Dowager Duchess did not believe in postponement when it could be helped. By 10 o'clock, she had ordered the smaller carriage, dismissed 2 offers of additional attendance, and informed Rachel that Mr. Pritchard's rectory lay less than 4 miles from Foxgrove. "If I take half the household, he'll think we have come to bury him," she said as the carriage rolled down the avenue. Rachel looked through the window at the thinning hedgerows. "Perhaps we should begin by assuring him otherwise." "You may do the reassuring. I shall do the asking." The Dowager settled more comfortably beneath the traveling rug. Robert wanted to come. Rachel turned. Did he? For approximately 3 minutes. Then he realized 3 people arriving to question an elderly rector might look less like concern and more like an inquiry. That sounded like Robert. Rachel had begun to recognize the difference between his instinct to confront a problem and his newer discipline of considering whether his presence would make truth harder to speak. "He was right to stay," she said. The Dowager's eyes rested on her. "You say that without disappointment." "Why would I be disappointed?" "Because you are fond of him." Rachel looked back toward the window. "Your Grace, I am old, not blind. Those qualities are not mutually exclusive." The Dowager gave a satisfied hum. That was nearly an admission. Rachel did not answer. She had no wish to turn Robert's struggle into romantic anticipation. Whatever existed between them had become real enough to require care. The rectory stood beside a small churchyard bordered by yew and low stone walls. Mr. Pritchard received them in a modest parlor warmed by a coal fire. Surprise crossed his face when he saw Rachel. Then concern when the Dowager explained the reason for the call. "My son has discovered that certain messages may have been sent in his name without his direct instruction," she said. "Mrs. Ludlow witnessed your call on the 11th. We hoped you might tell us only what you personally received." The rector looked at Rachel. "You were there." "Yes. I thought I remembered you." His embarrassment returned. "I hope His Grace does not believe I complained." "He believes you were turned away after he expected you to call," Rachel said. "That is all he knows from me." Mr. Pritchard was silent. Then he rose and crossed to a small writing desk near the window. He opened the top drawer and removed a cream card. Rachel recognized it before he returned to his chair. The small Foxgrove estate device sat at the top. The card was slightly softened at one corner from handling, but otherwise intact. "I kept it," he said. "I cannot tell you precisely why. Perhaps because the wording struck me as unusually personal." He held it out, not to surrender it, but so the Dowager and Rachel could see. Rachel did not touch it. The sentence was exactly the one she had glimpsed on arrival. "His Grace declines to receive callers." Beneath it, the date had been written in the porter's hand. "The 11th October 1852. "That is the same card I saw given to you," Rachel said. Mr. Pritchard nodded. "I have called at Foxgrove twice before this year. On both occasions I was told verbally that His Grace did not wish to receive me." The Dowager's face tightened. "Did anyone say Robert had personally given that instruction?" "Not in those words. Lady Josephine once said, 'His Grace prefers not to be troubled with parish questions.' Sir Vincent later told me Robert wished communication kept to essential matters." He gave a small, unhappy smile. One learns not to force oneself where one is unwanted. Rachel felt the sentence settle heavily between them. "His Grace asked you to call when he next came to Foxgrove," she said. "He told us so." Mr. Pritchard looked down at the card. "Then I have misunderstood him for some time." "Perhaps," Rachel said, "because someone wished you to." The Dowager glanced at her, but did not correct the conclusion. Mr. Pritchard folded his hand over the card. "If Robert wishes it, I will come tomorrow." "He does," the Dowager said, "but bring that only if you are comfortable doing so." "I shall bring it myself." He returned the card to the desk drawer before they left. Rachel watched the movement deliberately. The evidence remained his. Their second call took them another 2 miles along the church road to the home of Lady Fenmore, a widow with a sharp chin and sharper memory. Her account was shorter, but no less troubling. She had been told 3 times in the past 18 months that Robert wished not to receive her because private callers exhausted him. Once, Josephine had apologized on his behalf for what she called His Grace's preference for solitude. Lady Fenmore had stopped calling. "I thought it pride," she said. "Perhaps I should have thought it illness. Either way, one does not continue knocking upon a closed door." Rachel disliked the image because it was too exact. The door had been closed. Robert simply had not always been the one closing it. By early afternoon, they returned to Foxgrove with no documents except their own notes and no need for more. Rachel found Robert in the morning room rather than his study. He stood beside the window, one hand resting against the back of a chair. He did not ask whether the journey had gone well. "What did you learn?" The Dowager removed her gloves. "That you have been unpopular by proxy." Robert's mouth tightened. "Mother, I am saving Mrs. Ludlow from having to begin gently." Rachel sat only after he gestured toward a chair. "Mr. Pritchard kept the card from the 11th. Robert's eyes sharpened. "He still has it?" "Yes. He showed it to us. It remains with him." "And he had been refused twice before, verbally. Lady Josephine told him you preferred not to be troubled with parish matters. Sir Vincent said you wanted communication limited." Robert went very still. "I said neither. That is what he now understands." "Lady Fenmore?" the Dowager asked. Rachel continued. "She was told more than once that you did not wish to receive her because callers exhausted you." She stopped coming. Robert looked away. For several seconds, he said nothing. Rachel did not interrupt the silence. He had earned the right to decide what to do with it. "There is more," he said at last. The Dowager looked at him. "Hales spoke to me this morning." Robert's voice remained steady. He said Josephine has dictated refusals for years. Not every caller, not constantly, enough that he believed she had standing authority. Vincent repeatedly told the servants that screening people was necessary to spare me agitation. Rachel thought of Hales in the entrance hall, taking instructions with the unease of someone who had stopped distinguishing between household habit and personal command. Did Hales know whether you had approved specific refusals? No, he knew only that I had permitted screening in general. Robert looked at Rachel directly. That is the part I allowed. She did not rescue him from it. Yes. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. I permitted convenience to become custom. Then I stopped asking what the custom contained. The Dowager sat opposite him. That does not make invented messages yours. No. Robert's gaze remained on Rachel, but it means some people believed I rejected them because I made it easy for others to decide what I would tolerate. Rachel understood why this mattered to him. It would have been simpler to divide the story neatly into villains and victim. Robert refused that comfort. Mr. Pritchard is willing to come tomorrow, she said, with the card if you want him to bring it. Robert's breath caught faintly before he answered. I do. The word came after a pause, but no one supplied it. He continued. And Lady Fenmore, she said she would attend if the invitation truly came from you. Something passed over his face. Shame, perhaps, but not surrender. Then she shall have it from me. The Dowager rose. Good. I shall leave you to your terrible habit of speaking for yourself. She crossed the room and departed before Robert could answer. Rachel remained seated. Robert looked toward the closed door, then back to her. I have spent 10 years believing people withdrew because they found me cold. Some may have. You do not soften things. You asked for truth. A faint shadow of humor touched his eyes. I did. Rachel folded her hands in her lap, and some may have withdrawn because they were told you wanted them gone. Robert nodded slowly. That possibility is worse. Because it was done in your name, because I may have accepted loneliness as evidence of what I deserved. Rachel held his gaze. She did not reach for his hand. That moment belonged elsewhere. This one required something quieter. Then tomorrow may be unpleasant. Yes. But at least the people who come will hear from you directly. Robert took a breath. The first sound of his next sentence caught. Rachel waited. He finished it himself. That is what I want. This time, when silence followed, it no longer felt borrowed. Monday's luncheon was deliberately small, which made it more difficult to hide inside. Robert had invited only 6 people beyond the household. Mr. Pritchard, Lady Fenmore, Lord Ashwell, his wife, the retired colonel from the previous dinner, and Mrs. Fenton, who had known the Whitaker family since Robert was a boy. The arrangement was not accidental. These were people who had either witnessed his silences for years or been told, directly or indirectly, that those silences meant rejection. Rachel understood before the first course was cleared that Robert had chosen intimacy over spectacle. Saturday would bring the wider county circle. Today was rehearsal only in the sense that truth sometimes needed a smaller room before it could survive a larger one. Sir Vincent remained at Foxgrove, though the welcome around him had become visibly narrow. His luggage had not yet departed, and neither he nor Lady Josephine had been formally sent away. Robert had made it clear that their authority was suspended while he established what had been done in his name. Vincent seemed determined to behave as though suspension were merely an unpleasant family disagreement that might still be reversed. Lady Josephine did not attend luncheon, claiming a headache. Rachel doubted the headache, but appreciated the absence. The conversation began cautiously. Mr. Pritchard spoke about parish repairs. Lady Fenmore mentioned a tenant family whose eldest son had recently apprenticed in Sevenoaks. No one discussed the cream cards. No one mentioned false refusals. Yet those absent subjects sat at the table more plainly than the silver. Robert answered questions directly. His speech was measured. Twice a word slowed him, and twice the room waited. Rachel did not feel triumph. She felt the strain beneath his composure. This was not a man discovering courage for the first time. It was a man choosing not to use an old escape. When the second course had been removed, Lord Ashwell said, "Carringford, I understand Saturday's receiving afternoon is still to proceed." Robert set down his fork. "Yes." Vincent looked up. Robert continued. "The cancellation messages were not mine. Corrected invitations have been sent. Anyone who wishes to call on Saturday will be received." His next sentence began cleanly. "I also intend to explain that any personal refusal attributed to me in recent years may not have been." The word stopped. Rachel saw the familiar tightening at the base of his throat. The pause lengthened. No one moved. Vincent shifted in his chair. "May not have been personally directed by you," he supplied smoothly. "That is surely the simplest way to put it." Robert raised one hand. "No." Vincent froze. The word had been quiet, but the refusal was unmistakable. Robert did not look toward Rachel. He did not need to. He kept his gaze on Vincent and started again. "May not have been authorized by me." The final word caught once, then came. Robert breathed in. There is a difference between permitting assistance and surrendering the right to decide what I mean. Mrs. Fenton lowered her eyes. Mr. Pritchard looked at Robert with something like sorrow. Vincent smiled faintly. "No one asked you to surrender anything." Robert's hand remained flat against the tablecloth. "You answered a sentence I had not finished. I was helping. I asked you on Tuesday not to." "This is absurd." "No." Robert's voice caught again, but he did not hurry. "It is specific." Rachel saw Vincent glance around the table, perhaps searching for sympathy. He found discomfort instead. Robert looked toward Mr. Pritchard. "You called here on the 11th because I asked you to." "Yes, Your Grace. You were refused in my name." "Yes. I did not authorize that refusal." Mr. Pritchard inclined his head. "I understand that now." Robert turned to Lady Fenmore. "And you were told more than once that I preferred not to receive you." "I was. I did not say it." Lady Fenmore's expression softened, but Robert did not accept pity. "I should have asked sooner what was being said for me." The table went very still. Vincent leaned back. "So now you intend to confess incompetence before the county because Mrs. Ludlow has taught you to resent ordinary household management." Rachel felt every eye shift toward her. Robert's face changed. Not anger, precision. "Mrs. Ludlow has taught me nothing of the kind." Vincent opened his mouth. Robert continued before he could take the sentence. "She has done something far less comfortable. She has waited long enough for me to hear myself." Rachel lowered her gaze only after the words were complete. The emotion they stirred was too private for a dining table. Robert's attention returned to Vincent. "Saturday proceeds." There was no further argument. Conversation recovered slowly. The retired colonel began an improbable account involving a mare and a flooded ditch. Mrs. Fenton laughed in the right places, yet Rachel noticed something had shifted in the room, not because Robert had spoken flawlessly. He had not. He had paused. He had caught on words. Everyone had seen. The world had continued. Later, after the guests had dispersed and the afternoon light had turned grey along the windows, Rachel found herself in the long gallery with the Dowager Duchess, the older woman. paused beside the Reynolds portrait from the previous week and announced that she had letters to write in the adjoining morning room. Rachel understood the gift without pretending otherwise. Robert appeared several minutes later. He stopped when he saw her. "I hoped you might still be here. Your mother is writing letters." His eyes moved toward the open doorway at the end of the gallery. "Conveniently, Her Grace has many correspondents. Apparently all of them urgent." Rachel almost smiled. Robert did not. He came closer, though he left a respectful distance between them. "I owe you something. You have already thanked me. Not thanks." He looked toward the portraits. "Truth." Rachel waited. His hands were empty at his sides. "I spent years calling surrender convenience." The sentence came slowly. "Vincent answered because I let him. Josephine filtered people because I preferred not to know who might expect something difficult from me. I told myself I had chosen efficiency." He swallowed. "People were hurt because I stopped asking what was being said in my name." Rachel answered carefully. "You did not tell them to invent refusals." "No, but you allowed a structure in which you did not check." "Yes." The admission cost him. Rachel could see it. "I do not want to pretend responsibility means the whole fault belongs to me," Robert said. "It does not, but neither do I want to hide behind what they did." "That sounds fair." His eyes met hers. "Saturday may become ugly. Possibly. People may laugh at how much I permitted others to manage. Some will call it weakness. Some may decide Foxgrove is less formidable than they imagined." Rachel said nothing. "And your name is already attached to this," he continued. "If you wish to leave before Saturday, I will understand. I will arrange nothing. I will not ask where you go. I only want you to know that staying is not a condition of anything between us." The careful phrasing struck her more deeply than pleading would have. He was offering freedom before asking for affection. Rachel stepped toward him. Robert went still. She closed the remaining distance and placed her arms around him. For one heartbeat, he did not move at all. He waited. Only when she held him more firmly did his arms come around her. The embrace was warm, restrained, and unmistakably chosen. Rachel rested her cheek briefly against his coat. She could feel the breath he had been holding leave him. He did not tighten his arms beyond what she had given. He did not turn comfort into possession. "I am not staying because you need someone to stand beside you on Saturday," she said softly. "Then why are you staying?" His voice was near her temple. Rachel drew back enough to look at him. "Because I want to." Something unguarded moved across his face. She let her hands fall, and he released her at once. The absence of his arms felt immediate, but not empty. Robert looked at her for a long moment. "I have spent a great deal of my life being answered for, I know. I do not want you to become another person who must make difficult rooms easier for me." Rachel's heart tightened, because he had approached the very fear she had not yet voiced. Then, before Saturday, she said, "We should talk about what I can be." Robert nodded. Yes. His next word caught slightly. Rachel waited. He finished it himself. "Please, by Wednesday afternoon." Rachel knew exactly what frightened her about wanting Robert Whitaker. It was not his rank. It was not the scrutiny that would follow any woman who stood too close to a duke. It was the possibility that love might turn her into another useful person in a life already crowded with people who had called usefulness devotion. She had spent the morning considering the fear until it became precise enough to speak. Shortly after 3, she found Robert waiting in the smaller morning room adjoining the long gallery. The doors to both rooms stood open. The Dowager Duchess sat at a writing table beyond, close enough to satisfy propriety and far enough to grant them privacy. Rain had begun against the windows, soft and steady. Robert rose when Rachel entered. "Thank you for coming." "You asked?" "You said we should talk before Saturday." "We should." His expression changed slightly. He had expected difficulty and did not pretend otherwise. Rachel respected him for that. He gestured toward a chair, but she remained standing. After a moment, he did too. "There is something I need to say badly," Rachel began. "I would rather say it badly than soften it until it means nothing." Robert's mouth almost curved. "That sounds familiar. You may regret encouraging me." "I doubt it. You should reserve judgment." The humor disappeared, leaving honesty between them. Rachel folded her hands at her waist. "I care for you." Robert went very still. She saw the words reach him before hope did. "More than is convenient," she continued. "More than I intended. But if this becomes something lasting, there is one life I cannot agree to live." He did not interrupt. "I cannot become the woman who finishes every difficult sentence for you. I cannot be the person. Everyone watches whenever a room becomes uncomfortable. I cannot spend the rest of my life wondering whether you are speaking because you wish to speak or because I have made myself responsible for getting the words out." Robert's face had lost all softness, but not because he was angry. He was listening with the same severe concentration he gave important decisions. Rachel forced herself onward. "I cannot become your shield from embarrassment. I cannot become another intermediary between you and everyone else, simply because I might do it more kindly than Vincent or Josephine did." His first reply caught. She waited. "I know. Do you?" "I think I am beginning to." Rachel drew a careful breath. "Then understand the whole of it. If I become part of your life, I cannot be your courage by appointment." The room seemed to narrow around the sentence. Robert looked down once, then back at her. "No." Rachel's heart tightened. He continued before she could misunderstand. "No, you cannot, and I do not want you to be." His voice slowed on the next phrase. "I have spent 10 years allowing other people to make difficulty disappear before I had to face it. If I replaced them with you, I would have learned nothing except how to choose a kinder jailer." Rachel had not expected the bluntness. "That is a harsh word." "It should be. You were not imprisoned, not literally." His gaze remained on hers. "But I let comfort become authority. I will not ask you to become another form of it." Something inside Rachel loosened, but not entirely. What happens when we are married someday to other people or to no one, and you are in a room where words fail you? The question was deliberately broader than the future she wanted him to imagine. Robert understood anyway. "If I want help, I ask, and if you do not ask, you wait, even if the silence becomes awkward. Especially then," Rachel studied him. "And if I cannot make it easier," his answer came immediately. "Then you do not." She looked away toward the rain. "Robert, I am not always amusing. I am aware." She turned back sharply. His eyes held a glint now. "That was rude. Accurate. You have learned dangerous habits from you." The brief warmth between them faded into something deeper. Robert stepped closer, though not close enough to touch. "Rachel, I need you to understand something too." She waited. "You made me laugh. That mattered because I had forgotten laughter could arrive without cruelty attached to it. But that is not why I want you near me." Her breath caught. Robert continued, each sentence deliberate. "I want you when you are silent. I want you when you disagree with me. I want you when you are tired and do not wish to be useful. I want the woman who tells me I am wrong without first calculating whether a duke should hear it." Rachel felt heat rise behind her eyes and refused to look away. And if I never make you laugh again, a faint pause then, I would miss it. She nearly smiled. That is not an answer. No. He took a breath. If you never made me laugh again, I would still want you. The words came plainly. The laughter was a door. It was not the reason I walked through. Rachel's chest tightened so sharply that for 1 second she could not speak. Robert did not fill her silence. He waited for her exactly as she had waited for him. The balance of it moved her more than any elaborate declaration could have done. "Thank you," she said at last. "For what?" "For not making me responsible for saving you." His expression darkened with something like regret. "You have already done more than you should have had to do. I chose what I did." "Yes," Robert nodded, "and I want to keep knowing the difference." They stood close enough now that Rachel could see the faint line of tension beside his mouth. Saturday waited ahead of them. So did Vincent, Josephine, the county, and every person who might decide Robert's difficulty was amusing once it became visible. Yet this moment was not about any of them. Robert looked at Rachel's face, then lowered his gaze briefly to her mouth before returning to her eyes. He did not move closer. "May I kiss you?" Rachel felt the question everywhere, not as shock, as recognition. Every touch between them had led here by degrees. The accidental brush over the wooden fox, his hand asking for hers in the gallery, her palm offered on the terrace, her arms around him after the luncheon. Nothing had been taken, nothing had been rushed. "Yes," she said. Robert remained still for the smallest fraction of a second, giving her room even after permission. Rachel closed part of the distance herself. His hand lifted slowly and stopped near her cheek without touching until she leaned into the invitation. Then his fingers rested lightly along her jaw. The kiss was gentle, deliberate, and far more intimate for its restraint. Rachel felt no triumph in it, no sense of being chosen above other women, only Robert, warm and careful and unmistakably present. She touched one hand to his sleeve, steadying herself not because she needed rescue, but because she wanted contact. When they parted, neither moved away immediately. Robert's forehead almost touched hers. Then he checked himself and drew back enough to meet her eyes. Rachel kept her hand against his sleeve. "Was that badly said?" she asked softly. His breath changed. "Terribly. Good." This time the smile reached him before he could guard it. Rachel smiled too. Then the reality of Saturday returned, not as interruption, but as the next necessary thing. Robert looked toward the open doorway, where his mother still wrote without turning around. 2 days, he said. "Yes, I will have to speak for myself." Rachel let her hand fall from his sleeve. "Then I will stand where you can see me." His eyes searched hers. "And you will not finish a sentence. Not unless you ask." "Good." Rachel nodded. "Good." Whatever happened when Foxgrove's doors opened on Saturday, they had settled one truth before the county could test it. Rachel would stand beside him. She would not become his voice. By 3 o'clock, on Saturday afternoon, Foxgrove's entrance hall had become the one place in the house where no one could pretend the problem was private. The doors stood open to a cold November light. Hales remained at his post beside the card salver. 2 footmen received cloaks and announced visitors, and the Dowager Duchess stood near the morning room doorway with the composed watchfulness of a woman who had waited years to see her son stop surrendering difficult moments to other people. Rachel remained several feet away from Robert. Card B rested inside her reticule, exactly where she had kept it since Lady Josephine handed it to her on the 25th of October. She had checked it once that morning and then left it alone. The card did not need rehearsing, neither did the truth. Robert received the first callers personally. Lady Fenmore arrived with her niece and paused after Hales announced her. "Your Grace," she said, "I'm pleased to learn I'm still permitted through your door." There was no cruelty in the remark, only dry acknowledgement. Robert bowed. "You should never have been told otherwise." His speech caught slightly on told. He finished the word without assistance. Lady Fenmore nodded. "Then we'll begin again." Mr. Pritchard arrived 10 minutes later. The rector carried his hat beneath one arm, and inside his coat he had brought card A, the same cream Foxgrove card Rachel had watched him receive on the 11th of October. He greeted Robert without ceremony. "Thank you for asking me to come, Your Grace." Robert held his gaze. "Thank you for coming." More neighbors followed. Some had received corrected invitations. Others had come, because gossip traveled faster than any carriage. And half the county now understood that Foxgrove's ordinary afternoon at home had become something less ordinary. No one said so directly. Tea appeared. Gloves were removed. Familiar conversations began. For 20 minutes the house behaved as though nothing important was happening. Then Sir Vincent stepped away from the staircase. Lady Josephine stood beside him in dark silk, composed enough that only the whiteness around her mouth betrayed strain. "Robert," Vincent said, "this performance has gone far enough." Conversation thinned. Robert turned. "Has it? Everyone here knows Josephine and I have assisted you for years. There's no disgrace in that, unless you insist upon making one." Lady Josephine lifted her chin. "We protected your peace because you wanted it protected. You never objected." Rachel watched Robert receive the accusation without flinching away from the portion that was true. "I permitted assistance," he said. "I permitted callers to be screened when I was occupied. I permitted Vincent to help when speaking became difficult." The first sound of his next word caught. Vincent shifted automatically, lips parting as if the unfinished sentence belonged to him by habit. Robert looked directly at him. "No one speaks for me today." The hall went still. Robert took one deliberate breath. "I permitted help. I did not authorize either of you to invent personal refusals and send them as my wishes." Josephine's expression hardened. "We interpreted what you wanted, without asking me, because asking defeated the purpose." "No." Robert's voice remained quiet. "Asking was the purpose. You decided that my difficulty gave you the right to replace my answer." Vincent gave a short laugh without amusement. "Now you intend to humiliate your own family because a few callers misunderstood household management." Mr. Pritchard stepped forward. "I did not misunderstand the card I was given." Robert turned toward him. "Please." The rector reached inside his coat and removed card A. He did not surrender it. He held it in his hand. "This was given to me here on the 11th of October, after I asked to see His Grace. It states that His Grace declined to receive callers. I had been refused verbally twice before. I believed the refusal personal." Robert faced him fully. "It was not. I know that now." Lady Fenmore spoke from near the morning-room door. "I was told 3 times that His Grace preferred not to receive me because private callers exhausted him. I stopped coming because I thought continuing would be intrusive." Josephine's composure cracked. "And you were spared an awkward visit. Must kindness now be treated as conspiracy?" Rachel felt Robert's silence gather. He did not hurry through it. "I was grateful for convenience," he said. "That is true. I also failed to ask what that convenience was costing other people." The admission shifted something in the room. Vincent stared at him. Robert continued, My withdrawal was mine. The false words were yours. Josephine turned sharply toward Rachel. And Mrs. Ludlow's part in this? Are we to believe she has no interest in making herself indispensable now that we have been pushed aside? Rachel felt the old instinct to let a more powerful person answer. Robert could have destroyed the insult with one sentence. Instead, he looked at Rachel and waited. That was answer enough. I can speak for myself, Rachel said. She opened her reticule and removed card B. Lady Josephine gave me this card on the 25th of October. It says that, by His Grace's direction, I was not expected below that evening. She kept the card in her own hand. His Grace had given no such direction. Josephine's face flushed. You forced a private matter into public view. No, Rachel said. You delivered the message in the entrance hall before guests. I asked the person whose wishes you claimed to represent whether they were his. I was protecting this house from embarrassment. Rachel looked at her steadily. You did not protect his silence. You occupied it. No one moved. Then Hales spoke. Lady Josephine dictated Mr. Pritchard's refusal on the 11th. Sir Vincent had repeatedly told the household that her ladyship was authorized to decide which callers should be discouraged for your peace. We understood that authority more broadly than we should have. Vincent turned toward him. You understood what was convenient to understand. Robert stepped between the accusation and the porter without raising his voice. Hales answered the question, I asked. He won't be punished for telling me the truth. Vincent looked back at Robert. You would dismiss family over messages. No, I am ending authority that was never yours. Robert turned enough that the people nearest the threshold could hear him clearly. From today, Sir Vincent and Lady Josephine hold no authority over my household correspondence, servants, callers, or social arrangements. They will leave Foxgrove. Josephine went pale. Robert continued, slower now, his speech catching once before he finished. Every false refusal I can identify will be corrected personally. Where I withdrew because fear made convenience easier, I will say so. Where words were invented in my name, I will say that too. There was no applause. Rachel was grateful for that. Mr. Pritchard slipped card A back inside his coat. Lady Fenmore moved nearer the Dowager. Hales resumed his position by the doors. One conversation began, then another. The room did not celebrate Robert. It simply accepted the truth and continued around it. By early evening, the last carriage had departed. Sir Vincent and Lady Josephine had withdrawn upstairs to prepare for their removal from Foxgrove. Rachel stood with the Dowager near the open morning-room door when Robert approached. He looked exhausted. He also looked more entirely himself than he had on the day Rachel arrived. He stopped before her and offered one hand rather than taking hers. Rachel placed her hand in it. His fingers closed around hers. I love you, Rachel. The words were quiet and imperfect and entirely his. Not because you made me laugh, not because you made speech easier. I love you because you never confuse loving me with speaking for me. Rachel's throat tightened. She did not look away. And I love you, Robert. I love the man who speaks slowly, laughs unexpectedly, and still belongs entirely to himself. His eyes closed for one brief second. Rachel stepped toward him first. She put her arms around him, and only then did Robert hold her. The embrace carried no urgency to prove anything. It was warmer than the one in the gallery because nothing between them remained unnamed. When they drew apart, Robert released her without turning affection into claim. A small, uncertain smile touched his mouth. I'm not going to ask you to marry me tonight. Rachel's own smile came. That is an unexpectedly reassuring beginning. His expression softened. May I court you properly? Rachel looked once toward the entrance doors where so many answers had left Foxgrove under another person's authority. Then she looked back at him. Yes, she said, you may. 3 days after the receiving afternoon, Rachel left Foxgrove, because remaining would have been easier. That was precisely why she went. Sir Vincent and Lady Josephine had departed the morning before, taking trunks, servants, and the last assumption that Foxgrove would continue to bend around them. Their baronetcy remained untouched. Their property remained theirs. What they lost was less visible, and in their world, more painful. Carringford patronage ended. Invitations that had once arrived, because people believed the Keens, spoke with ducal authority, became fewer. Several county families quietly reconsidered old messages and older favours. Robert did not pursue humiliation for its own sake. He wrote instead, to Mr. Pritchard, to Lady Fenmore, to every caller he could identify as having received a false refusal. Each letter distinguished what was his from what was not. Where he had withdrawn, he admitted it. Where another person had invented his wishes, he corrected the record. At Foxgrove, Hales received one new rule and repeated it to every servant who handled callers or correspondence. No personal answer was to be attributed to the Duke, unless it bore Robert's own mark, or had been spoken directly by him. Then, on the 9th of November, Rachel returned to her modest house near Tunbridge Wells with card B, still in her writing case, and no promise except the one Robert had asked permission to make. He would court her properly. He did. The first time Robert called, Rachel kept him waiting in her drawing room for 4 minutes because her maid had not finished pinning a cuff. He stood when she entered and looked so solemn that she nearly apologized. Then she remembered that she had spent years apologizing for taking up ordinary time. "You've been waiting," she said. 4 minutes. A terrible hardship. I'm considering whether I shall recover. You may require tea. Then I'll risk survival. The ease of it pleased her because it was not always easy. Some visits contained long pauses. Some letters arrived with phrases crossed out and carefully rewritten. Robert once admitted that a particular letter had taken 3 drafts. Rachel turned the sheet over and examined the clean reverse, and no secretary improved it. "No, your mother? Absolutely not. Then I suppose I must accept the defective article." His eyes warmed. Cruel woman. The 3rd draft remained his, and that mattered more than polish. Through November, December, and January, he called under proper forms, wrote without intermediary, and learned that affection did not require Rachel to become endlessly agreeable. They disagreed over a proposed alteration to a tenant lease. Rachel told him one clause was needlessly severe. Robert defended it for 20 minutes, went home, reconsidered, and wrote 2 days later that she had been right. She kept that letter for reasons entirely unrelated to victory. On the 5th of February, he came to her house shortly after luncheon. No guests had been invited. No family waited behind a screen. Her maid showed him into the drawing room and left the door appropriately open to the hall. Robert stood near the fireplace until Rachel entered. She knew almost immediately. His hands were too still. "You look alarmed," she said. "I am. That is inconvenient." "Very." She crossed the room and stopped before him. Robert took one breath. The beginning of his next sentence caught, but Rachel did not move. He finished it himself. "I have spent months trying not to ask this before I could ask it honestly." Rachel's heart beat hard enough to make stillness difficult. Robert continued, I do not want to rescue you from your house, your income, your widowhood, or your own decisions. I want to share a life with you if you choose the same." Then he asked her to marry him. Rachel let him finish every word. Only afterward did she smile. "Yes," she said, "I choose the same." The settlement discussions that followed were conducted with Rachel's own solicitor, as well as Robert's. Her annuity remained protected as her independent interest. Robert did not call the provision unnecessary, romantic, or insulting. He called it sensible. The banns were read. On the 15th of March, in a quiet Kent parish church, Rachel Ludlow became Rachel Whitaker, Duchess of Carringford. The wedding was neither a social spectacle nor a secret. The Dowager Duchess cried without discretion. Mr. Pritchard performed part of the service with a voice that shook only once. Hales stood among the household witnesses. Robert's vows contained pauses. Rachel heard each one and never mistook them for uncertainty. By the 20th of April, London had begun to fill for the season, and Carringford House stood open for Rachel and Robert's first married receiving afternoon. The house was grander than Rachel's home and more formal than Foxgrove. But Robert had brought one object that made the entrance hall feel unexpectedly personal. The small wooden fox sat on a polished table near the receiving cards, its chipped ear unchanged, its severe little face turned toward the front doors. Robert had packed it himself among his private desk things in a dispatch box when they left Foxgrove. Rachel had watched him unwrap it that morning. "You're giving him a promotion," she had said. "He has survived 30 years of criticism. Then public office is the natural conclusion." Now callers passed the fox without understanding its importance. Rachel preferred that. Not every symbol required an audience. Near 4 o'clock, an elderly gentleman engaged Robert in a question about a county appointment. Rachel stood close enough to hear, but not beside him as if assigned to supervise. Robert answered the first sentence easily. The next caught at its beginning. The gentleman waited. So did Rachel. She did not turn toward Robert anxiously. She did not prepare the missing word. She let the silence belong to him. Robert tried again. The word came. He completed the answer in his own time. The gentleman nodded and continued the conversation as though nothing remarkable had occurred. Only after the exchange ended did Robert's hand find Rachel's. His fingers closed around hers for one brief moment between callers. She looked at him. "You managed without me. I was hoping you had not noticed. I notice everything. It is one of my defects. I have become attached to it." Later, after the last caller had gone and the front doors remained open, only long enough for the evening air to clear the hall, Rachel found Robert beside the little fox. His shoulders had lowered with fatigue. "Well," he asked. "Well, what?" Did His Grace survive a receiving afternoon without a committee appointed to interpret him? Rachel considered, narrowly. "I feared as much." As she stepped closer, he looked at her. "I love you." The words no longer felt like revelation. They felt like home. "I love you too," he said. Rachel touched his cheek, waited until he leaned into her hand, and kissed him. She initiated it without hesitation. Robert answered with the same restrained warmth he had shown from the beginning, one hand settling lightly at her waist only after she moved closer. When they parted, he smiled, not for a room, not because anyone was measuring whether he could. Rachel slipped her hand into his, and together they looked toward the open doors. On the hall table, the chipped wooden fox faced outward as if keeping watch over a house in which no one would again be permitted to borrow another person's voice. Robert's hand tightened gently around hers. Rachel did not stand ahead of him. He did not stand ahead of her. They stood beside one another.